Hello, everybody. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for joining us here for CFL Talk. Welcome to and thank you for being here. This is on the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download the app, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now, on CFL Talk, joining me is David Morassutti, fresh from practice.
Yeah, fresh from walkthrough. Although they didn't walk today was weird. They didn't do their walkthrough at BMO Field. They did their walkthrough at Lamport.
Oh,
Stadium.
they didn't wait to go back.
So they did Lamport, and then we met them at BMO Field after. So that was interesting. Usually not the case.
So what do you have to tell me?
Well, Chad Kelly was so talkative. Well, he wasn't very talkative. I think it's a lot. I will give credit to Sean Amos. Pretty, he very, I wouldn't say forthcoming, but very. I think the team realizes that that loss against Hamilton was that hurt, and we talked I literally called. You were like the first person I called after the locker room. I've never been in a locker room so quiet. Like almost like the realization that this is a game that they needed. I wouldn't say needed to win. It wasn't like a must win for Toronto as much as it was a must win for Hamilton, but it was like it would have been nice if we had this one, because then it would have made life a lot easier for Toronto.
It was an unpredictable low point in their season thus far.
Yeah.
Which raises the question, will it remain till the end of the season as the low point and the realization and the bounce back of a season that right now we're at a point with the Toronto Argonauts, watching the Toronto Argonauts and seeing the way they're playing. We're on a downside. Like, they're slipping downwards. They're not trending. Not even, there was a time there we might have said, you and I might have said they were trending kind of straight across, right, horizontally. But now they are really trending down. And the question is, how far down are they going to go before they go back up? I know that they hope, and maybe they realize that they hit what they hope will be the bottom for this season. What do you think?
Well, Amos talked to us as if like that game had a playoff feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think it really hit the players, right? Like, this is a team that, in the last year and a half, how many lows? Like last year, they didn't hit a single low really until they lost in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So I think there was a bit of a reality check for the team, right? How many times had Toronto been on the other end of those late game finishes? Right?
Easy answer.
So I think there was a bit of
on the bad end.
Yeah. So I would say that this is a situation here where Toronto, I think a reality check was kind of needed for the team, in my opinion.
Oh, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. This is a team that, as a group, has been failing to be the kind of cohesive unit that they have been in the past under Ryan Dinwiddie. This is new territory for the coach as well. He has never had a team that plays as inconsistently in a negative, and I mean it in a negative way, as this team is playing this year.
I would say that when he first joined 2021, there were some of those inconsistencies, but I think what the reality is, the rest of the division is caught up to Toronto.
Yeah, and a couple of teams have passed them.
Well, that's an even better way of saying it. It's not just that they're other teams have caught up. Yeah, it's that they're third. They're not guaranteed a playoff spot.
No, and that loss against Hamilton has opened the door for hope and belief
Yeah.
by the Hamilton Tiger Cats and their fan base that this team can actually do it. And even worse, if you're looking at it from the Argo perspective, their quarterback, Bo Levi Mitchell, is playing as well as he's played since before he was a Cat.
Yeah. We're starting to see a bit of the MOP Bo Levi Mitchell. Now, am I saying if this season ended today, he would be the MOP? Not there yet,
But he'd be
but
in the conversation.
he should be in the conversation based on his play the last few weeks and Hamilton only being alive, in my opinion, because of the way Bo Levi Mitchell's playing.
He has thrown for a lot of yards. He's never historically been the guy in the league that leads all quarterbacks, in total yards. But he's been a quarterback who's made it to the Grey Cup enough times and, won as well, that, his greatness cannot be doubted historically. He's been a great quarterback. And I think the biggest thing is I don't think Bo Levi Mitchell forgot how to be a quarterback. I think he's finally healthy, David. I think that's just it. I'm one of those people that didn't like his contract because it weighs down the other parts of the team that are necessary. But he gave back some money, and now he's playing not only like a leader, but he's playing like a champion.
Well, playing like the quarterback that was expected of him when he first joined Hamilton, right? Hamilton was hoping he'd rediscover his Calgary form.
Yeah, his pre-Calgary form, because he left Calgary because he kind of lost his mojo, right?
Yeah.
And Hamilton was gambling on him reclaiming his ability, right, and his success.
I think that's
And I
probably a
told you
better
back
way.
then when he went to Hamilton, Hamilton has a history of bringing in quarterbacks that have basically, not been run out of town, but have not been very good at the places they were, and therefore they became free and went to Hamilton and then found another gear, that wasn't there.
Well, yeah, exactly. And like Hamilton, they've had good teams, right? But when was the last time they had a quarterback that was like inserting himself right into
Henry
the
Burris,
game? Burris,
Caleros,
yeah, I was gonna say Caleros when he first got there. There was a little bit of Mazzoli when he was first there,
yeah,
when he was
Mazzoli.
healthy, right? But that's a long time ago. Like we're talking pre 2019. We're talking
Coincidentally, the last time the team was successful.
right.
That's what
So,
we're talking about.
and let's not forget too that this is a team that's just revamped its coaching staff with Chris Jones joining, which
You
I'm
mean the
very
Argo coaching staff?
well. Chris Jones joining. Well, yeah, Chris Jones, and then you got Scott Milanovich, right? I don't know how many former Argos are on the team, but I think there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen there. But I think they're finding a way through the chaos of it all to just make the smart decisions. Right? They're not Hamilton. What's really helped them is they're getting off to good starts. They're not trailing. They're not falling behind and having to force plays.
Right.
And I think that's crucial for Hamilton
And they have
because
a bit of a run in their game too.
yeah, I mean, and they got a running game too. Well, how many times have I said Hamilton needs to get a running game? And they finally get one. It's funny because James Butler, they weren't too thrilled with his play. Bell comes in, plays so well, he gets hurt. Butler comes in, they did all right, right? But like, they need to be more of a balanced offense. Hamilton was trying very hard to let's go throw it out, throw it out, throw it out, throw it out. Like sometimes just take the safe play. Bo Levi Mitchell running the ball. Never saw that before, right? Like this is I think right now for Hamilton, we talked about this. I think in the last show we talked about it. Maybe I talked with you. I talked to some people about it. But like their playoff dreams aren't dead.
Heck no.
They got the crossover still. Like people for think, but if Toronto gets third place, it's over. Look at the West. For the first time, we could have an East team cross over to the West, and I'm sure people didn't even realize that was a possibility, but it is. And I think if Saskatchewan hadn't won last week, I think we'd be talking about Saskatchewan being in trouble, losing out to Hamilton.
Absolutely. I don't think it's going to happen. I really think it's Hamilton or Toronto, not both. I don't see Ottawa falling down. Well, I guess it's possible, but I just don't see where they are right now, putting them in jeopardy as far as a playoff place is concerned. It's funny, David, that Scott Milanovic is coaching a quarterback that was not necessarily run out of town, but they weren't in a hurry to keep him in Calgary, being Bo Levi Mitchell. And he had a quarterback that actually Edmonton did run out of town, Ricky Ray. And now he's coaching another veteran quarterback who's, trying to reclaim previous greatness, right? And we know that was a success with Ricky Ray. And Scott Milanovic is making this his team. And I'm learning that Scott Milanovic is a flexible kind of guy. He isn't a guy that he really is a coach that builds his team around the quarterback and has a game plan that suits his quarterback. A subtle difference between Bo Levi Mitchell and Ricky Ray, for whom Milanovic had success with both, Grey Cup with one, that being Ricky, is the fact that Ricky threw a lot of passes, high percentage passer, but a lot of the passes were for 4 or 5 yards. With Bo Levi Mitchell, he's averaging about 10 yards a pass, which tells you he's throwing the ball further downfield. And we all know that's what Bo Levi Mitchell likes to do. I think if you're an Argo fan and if you're the Argos, you got to be concerned because you're dealing now with a coach and a quarterback who are in a really good rhythm. The Hamilton team at quarterback, the quarterback room, however you want to define it. Quarterback play looks really good in Hamilton. That's something that they've been missing. These years they haven't made the playoffs or not had good seasons have been directly related to the quarterback and the quarterback's ability and consistency to do good things.
Yeah, no, for sure. And they almost blew up in their face this year because Bo Levi Mitchell starts the year. Taylor Powell comes in for Bo Levi Mitchell, who gets benched. And Bo Levi Mitchell only comes back in because Taylor Powell gets hurt. I really am curious how different Hamilton's season would be if this is Taylor Powell at quarterback and not Bo Levi Mitchell.
It's a good question, but it's a good question. It's a good question, but at the end of the day, this is where we are. This is what we have. The same thing could be said for the team that they beat, the Toronto Argonauts. What if? I'll throw this out there. What if Kelly didn't have the problems he had last year? What would have happened in that Eastern final if he hadn't had a brain cramp and did what he did? And how would he be playing right now if that didn't happen? So I guess the point I'm trying to make, David, is it really doesn't matter because what matters is what they're dealing with today. And what both the quarterbacks now, when you look at the game between Hamilton and Toronto, you're seeing a switch where now you've got Toronto that has an iffy kind of quarterback and Hamilton that has a dyed-in-the-wool star at quarterback. And losing the way the Argos did so close tells me they're playing a team with a really good quarterback playing really well. Their quarterback's not playing that well. Their team is not playing that well. Yet they lose it in a last-second field goal. So it's not like they're that far off. For Argo fans, stop panicking. It's not like they got blown out by Bo Levi Mitchell and the Ticats.
No, I think is also you know, an exclamation. It's more the panic of what's happened the last 3 weeks, right? Last month since Labor Day. Lose to Hamilton after you were down bad. You get embarrassed by Ottawa. You play well and you beat BC handedly.
On the
Then you
road.
go and you lose to Hamilton. Yeah. So I think there's a little bit of that. You don't want to lose to Hamilton, but I think one thing that can't be ignored on Toronto's part is Ryan Dinwiddie, after in our press conference, he used the S word when talking about his defense. He called them soft. It was very pointed. It was very like that's a damning statement on a defense. But
For
also
Ryan
like
Dinwiddie, that's strong language. Yeah, he's a very
and like
positive guy when it comes to
Dinwiddie is not one to sometimes hold back. Does wear his heart on the sleeve, but I agree at some points that the defense wasn't good enough, but the defense also made 5 straight goal line stops. I don't think a soft defense does that. I just think that this is a defense that's kind of I wouldn't say treading above water, but there clearly is a lot of I think confidence is a big thing with this defense.
Well, if they were a boat, and they
Yeah.
being the boatmen, they've sprung a few leaks, and those leaks are causing them problems. Teams are identifying those leaks, and that's what Hamilton did. Hamilton picked on those leaks, picked on those deficiencies in the defense, and gave took what the Argos defense gave.
Well, that's it, right? That like Hamilton wasn't constantly throwing the long ball. They said, "Okay, you guys are going to cover deep. We're going to find the short routes."
Yeah, the stuff underneath.
Toronto struck, and there were times in that game where Toronto could have gone off the field. It's happened to them many times this year. They allow a guy to get open, and he goes free for a big gain. It's those moments. The Toronto's defense lives and breathes off of takeovers and turnovers and giving their offense good field
Big
starting
plays.
position.
It sounds like you're saying big
Yeah.
plays. Their
Yeah,
defense is
there are
accustomed to
big
making
plays.
big plays.
They preach that, right? They're all about that, but it just has not happened for them. Not yet, at least. It hasn't happened enough this year.
Well, they weren't as bad in that game on what I think has been their biggest deficiency, and that is second and long. They weren't that bad this week. Stopping, finishing off a team that's having difficulty getting a first down. Right? They until this week were having really a lot of trouble with second and long. They just couldn't stop offenses. They were a little better, like you said, and especially when you're talking about being able to stuff them in the red zone. They did a good job of that. But I guess for me, it still always seems to be that come back to watching them the last 4 weeks. Their offense is not a winning offense. It's an offense that has depended on touchdowns by their kick returner, big plays by their defense. They haven't been the offense has not been the big play producer that they need to be. That doesn't mean they have to totally do everything, but it does mean they've got to be the difference. They have not been the difference maker the past while.
Well, that's it too, right? When we talk to Dinwiddie, he talks about not having to be Superman,
Right.
right? And
Right.
even in Hamilton with Levi Mitchell, don't have to be Superman. I think that as much as we like to see quarterbacks be Superman and quarterbacks making these plays, it's also the reality of the CFL. The defenses are too good. They're too good. You can't try to be too much out there and hope that it's going to work. Right? You can't be pushing the envelope too much, otherwise you're going to get burned. So
if Superman isn't the goal, would it be fair to say that workman like success should be at a minimum, right? Like,
yeah,
and
for
that's
sure.
what they're not doing. They have to have workman like success. You know, the old saying, chopping wood.
No, exactly, right? Like you don't necessarily need to also just don't make it hard on yourself, right? Don't put yourself in like penalties are a big thing, right? Don't take unnecessary penalties because it backs you up and now you're behind the eight ball before you even really get going, right? If anything. So, and like there's just sometimes like the little things, the little details, a play here, play there, really also do make a difference.
And they should make a difference. It is what it is. You know, the Argos have had difficulty this year, and please don't take this as excuse making. They've had key injuries all year this year. I'm just wondering, you know, I think they really miss their kick returner. I think they really do.
He's
And
gonna
you
be
know,
back. That's a
yeah,
good thing. He's back this week, but yeah, they missed him for sure.
field position is such an imperative thing that needs to be good for a team to be successful. Field position is everything in the Canadian Football League. You know, you only get 3 downs. So that makes field position even that much more important. And the Argos have not played with really good field position. You know, they didn't against the Ticats, at least anyway. You know, the points that they did score, you notice they came from a long way to score them.
Yeah, they had to drive down the field, and that's tough to do consistently in the CFL, right? I mean, Hamilton was able to do it on their final drive for sure, but yeah, it isn't easy. That's why special teams mean a lot more in the CFL. That ability to give your offense better field position, it changes your play calling, it changes your approach, right? And I think that can't get overlooked for sure.
And helps your patience.
No,
You
yeah, exactly.
know, for a really good offense, you have to be patient. You have to take what you're given. And the Argos are trying to take what they're not given because, and we've seen if there's a flaw in Kelly's game, it's when he does get impatient and doesn't eat the ball when he should have.
Yeah.
And that's been costly for the team.
It has been, especially when your defense isn't good enough
Yep.
to
Take the
back it up.
coach's statement. That's right. We don't play good enough to cover up our mistakes.
And Dinwiddie said that
That's what
multiple
the coach
times.
says all the time. We're not good enough to cover up our mistakes. We have to stop making mistakes, and that's part of the issue, of course. So this week, the Argos have a game against the Grey Cup champs. Statement game. They played BC and BC, a team that admittedly has been hot and cold, but they played BC when BC was hot, and they handled them. They're going to need to do the same thing at home against Montreal this week.
Oh, no doubt. I do think that this is an Argos team that has a lot more to play for. Like Montreal right now, they they got to be careful because they've clinched what they've needed to. They're going to be in a position where they got everything clinched. So Montreal is in a little bit of like Toronto's. I would say completely because I think Montreal there's a few tough losses right now that Toronto didn't have. But yeah, I know if I'm Toronto right now, this is I wouldn't say a must win game, but this is a game where you need to show up. You need to show if you are going to be a championship team, if you are going to say you're going to the playoffs, you need to beat one of these teams and have a bit of a statement while doing it.
Absolutely. And you know, if you're Montreal, now you're in the position now where you have to make the decision as to whether, um, you know, you feel you can rest players. I I have to tell you, it's very interesting to say the least. It's going to be very interesting. I was just trying to check this to see if they had any bye weeks, and I'm not having any luck here. Where are we?
I
There we
think yeah, I think most of the teams have done the amount of bye weeks they've needed to do, if I'm not wrong.
I don't know.
And like Montreal's coming off an impressive win over Ottawa. Like they want to prove something too to these teams below them that you're below us for a reason. I think that's what they did against Ottawa. Now they're going to want to do the same to Toronto, right?
Right?
And Montreal won in Toronto earlier this year.
Excuse me.
There's a bit of that. I think there's a bit of the realization that you know they want to send messages to the other teams in the league. That's Montreal's way of doing things.
Absolutely.
So it'd be interesting to see how that game goes. That's for sure.
And it looks to me like the Alouettes have no more bye weeks left.
Yeah, I think they're pretty much they're playing the rest of the year.
They play in oh, wait, no, they have a bye week in week 18. I don't see a game in week 18.
Okay.
So after Toronto, they have a bye week. The reason I say that is because that means they have 3 games they have to play after the bye week. If we remember correctly, the Argos had what, 6, 7 games last year
Mm-hmm.
after the last bye week. It was almost half a season.
Right.
Almost. So that's an issue that Montreal doesn't have to deal with. They can rest their whole team with 3 games left in the season and then play the last 3 games, and then they'll end up with another bye week because they're first. And the schedule, I'm not saying plays to their favor, but it does not play against them like it did with the Argos last year. And you can all start saying it's excuses and stuff. Go ahead. I don't really care. But to me, that's a fact. They had to play. That was ridiculous. They had to play 7 games without a bye week. They played, I think, in their first half of the season, they had all their bye week games. I think plus 1 game, I think, after. And I hope no team ever has to do that again. That's
Yeah. More balance in the schedule. We've only said that a few times before. No.
absolutely. Well, but that issue is a big one because it's just come on, it's a tough sport. The whole point of the bye weeks, what's the whole point of the bye weeks? The whole point of the bye weeks is that the Players Association and the league agreed that players' bodies need a rest. They need a time when they can slow down. So you give a team a bye week the first week, and then they're done with all their bye weeks by mid-season. And what does that say for the other half of the season? It says, well, you know what we said about resting? It doesn't matter.
Well, yeah, it's kind of true in a way. I do believe there's a bit of that to it, but yeah, I mean, right now there's well, especially when it comes to the playoffs, it's the team that's mentally and physically ready for it, right? And yeah, we talked about, you know, um, they talk about creating their own bye weeks and things like that, but sometimes if you do that, it throws the team off a rhythm as well.
No, if you're breaking the team up, I'm a firm believer. I don't believe what the Argos did last year. I don't blame them for doing it. Not at all. That's not my point. But to be put in a position where now you're starting to treat the season like training camp,
Mm.
and that's essentially what ends up happening. You end up treating the season like training camp. And now you're not working on a rhythm to get the team going. Because once training camp ends, you put your lineup in there, and that's the one you use, and you keep playing with that lineup. You don't worry about it changing unless football has injuries. So that's when you make change, when you have to. But having guys sit on the sidelines who are healthy and can play, not playing, that's just not a good thing. I just don't think it works in football.
I don't think it does either, and I don't think the players want it either.
I don't either. I think they all want a reasonable amount of rest, instead of rust and or maintaining a rhythm. It's not just about rust and rest. It's also about rhythm. And there's a rhythm required on a team, and when players are pulled out, especially players that are key to the team, the rhythm of the team and the way the team plays changes. And it's just not a good thing. It's hard enough to play with players that are that have been injured. It's hard to deal with that. But then you're bringing people in because you need them to play well. They're not coming in because they're resting the guy. They're coming in because they need to play well. It's you got to play. It's a different mindset, in my opinion. Maybe I'm making too much of it.
Um, no, I don't think you're making too much of it. I think there's something to be said about it, but maybe players have gotten a lot better at managing it now. Now that they kind of know what to expect of it, I think that would
Right.
be my response to that.
Yeah, I think so. But it's important, and we've got ourselves some really interesting games that played real quick. The games that were played last week. That, of course, was the Argo game was 33-31. And then we had Saskatchewan. And you talked a little bit about the fact that Saskatchewan needed to play well, and they did. Um, I, I'm I'm a believer that Saskatchewan is a team. If they clean up their act, they could end up winning in the Western Final playoff game. They could win if they get their stuff together. They've had injuries, they've had problems, and going into this season, they brought in a new coach that high profile in regards to, even though he was a rookie quarter coach, people had a lot of faith in him. We know him from here in Toronto, and he has put his stamp on this team. They're a very proud team. They're a very hardworking team. Um, and in this game, you get your number one quarterback back, and that kind of helps too.
I mean, with Saskatchewan, I think the issues have not been their offense. I think it has been, well, I shouldn't say it. Part of it has been their offense. It's just it's timely mistakes. Because yeah, do they have a good enough team to be a competitor in the West? I believe so. I don't think they're the best offensive team. I still think that's BC. I am the more well-rounded team. I think Winnipeg has such a good defense. They've got the run game that they're able to control the game. And then like BC, there's such a fireaway offense that it's tough to stop. So, I mean, look, you look at the top three: Winnipeg 16 points, BC 14 points, Saskatchewan 13 points. That was such a crucial win. I said that must have that like I thought that was a must win for Saskatchewan, especially because Edmonton has been sneaking around behind. They've been keeping it
They're in
close,
striking distance.
right? And then you got Hamilton on the other side. There's a little more urgency now for Saskatchewan to really say we are not going to lose this spot. We are going to make sure that we get in there. And then once we're there, we know anything can happen.
So, do you think that Trevor Harris is a quarterback that can take this team into the playoffs and finally prove that he's a championship quarterback? Is he healthy enough?
That's my big worry for him. Is he healthy enough? Because to me, I think I do think he's good enough. Like he's learning to be efficient. I mean, look, and he had a running back that just went over 200 yards for him.
Yeah, let's that is amazing.
And his
Well,
first,
Armstead,
yeah,
25 carries, 207 yards, an average of 8.3 yards. My goodness.
right. So I do think that I do think that you look at it, if they can find a bit more balance, that's why they brought in AJ Willett before he got hurt. It was that balance that made them a tough team to play against. So once they lost Willett, then when Harris came down, they just got discombobulated a bit. And so if Saskatchewan can establish that identity of being a balanced attack on offense, tough to stop, it's going to help a player like Trevor Harris. I don't know. I think right now Trevor Harris just needs to take a page out of the Ricky Ray or right now Bo Levi Mitchell. You don't need to be the hero. Don't need to be the hero. Just don't be the guy that costs your team the game.
Yeah. Again, not Superman.
No.
Just
And
workman.
I do think
Workman.
if you're looking at quarterbacks across the league, he's still pretty good there.
Absolutely. Calgary's a team that, man, just when you think they've got things figured out, they get cut
had
up.
things figured out. I didn't think so. I thought they were a bit.
There was a time there when their quarterback was, the mayor of Calgary was making a big difference. And now they're back to where they were, and not being able to win.
Um, Calgary, yeah, I thought they were getting. I wouldn't say they're getting their act together. I thought they were finding things out a little bit and not putting the ball all in Jake Maier's hands. But eventually, when your quarterback needs to step up and play, Jake Maier hasn't been able to do it, or
Yeah,
not good
it's
enough.
true. I mean, Derek Mills ran for 74 yards. Tommy Stevens himself ran for 69. So they were
Yeah.
able to make some yardage on the ground, which should be a key into helping the offense.
I do think, man, like that's a team there that needs a bit of a reset, a cultural reset. I wouldn't say a cultural reset because we know Calgary was they were the standard in the CFL. I don't think that has changed, but I do think that look they hedged their bet on Mara as their quarterback. It hasn't worked.
No, not
Uh,
consistently.
Not consistently enough, and that doesn't fly with a Dave Dickinson team.
Or a Calgary fan base.
No, exactly, and that's
That too, right?
I do think that's the bigger concern right now is how long will that fan base stick beside a team like this?
Well, that's something that they need to figure out. Then you have Montreal and Ottawa. I gotta say, um, Montreal wins when they need to. This. They're playing like a Grey Cup champ. They're actually doing that.
I do think they're still doing the things that like defensively
That's
they're
that's.
so that defense on the Norththorpe has gone through
Oh,
such a change that they're so hard to
oh my
predict and so hard to
goodness,
go up
they're good.
against. They found some good players there. Offensively, I'm not convinced still now.
Me either.
Like
Me either.
Right,
I mean,
I don't think that they're not winning. They're not going to be winning the Grey Cup off the strength of their offense. In my opinion, yeah, did they get some good players back? Speaker's good. They got Austin Mack back, but I'm not as convinced that offensively that they're that good. I think it's their defense creates so many opportunities for
absolutely.
their offense, and look, once in a while, like that's going to be so crucial for them down the stretch that their defense has to maintain this pace. It's not easy to do, but the offense just has to make sure that they don't make mistakes. That's always been the key for them. Don't make mistakes. Don't put your team behind the eight ball, and they haven't done that really that much this year.
And Fajardo has not been that effective as a passer
Yeah, no,
since
exactly right.
injury.
So I also think Ottawa. That was just such a poor performance from Ottawa. Surprising in a way, considering how well they played at home.
Absolutely.
But again, it just also speaks to the margin of error against a team like Montreal that's going to take advantage of any mistake,
Absolutely.
right? Or just that inability to. They're just so tough to play against. Like, yeah, I look at that game from Ottawa. Your quarterbacks throw for 3 interceptions.
Yes. Thank you. Just took the words right out of my mouth.
Kind of a familiar feeling, no?
It's
And there was a fumble in there too.
how you lose.
Oh, sorry,
In
I
in
think
the games that we talked about till now, the first two games, interceptions were not a factor. This one here, they made up for interceptions.
Yeah.
Yep. This and Drew Brown has been a quarterback that you could pretty much depend on, right? To be the kind of quarterback that doesn't make mistakes. And my goodness, yeah, 3 interceptions. And as much as I'd love to blame the quarterbacks, I think we're talking about the Montreal defense again.
Yeah, I think they're the strength of the team,
Yeah,
right? You're winning a lot of games. Your defense holds your opponent to under 12 or less to 12 points.
absolutely.
Your offense doesn't have to do that. Well, offense does have to. I'm not saying offense doesn't have to do anything. They do have to execute, but it's a lot easier when your defense gives you a bigger margin for error.
Absolutely. Montreal goes into Ottawa, wins 24-12. Then Winnipeg and Edmonton. Edmonton's the team that this is terrible. I guess I'm not being a very good reporter when I say this is a team I'm pulling for. I really want to see Edmonton do well. I just I guess the record-breaking losing streak, so much bad luck when it comes to injuries. They have a really good quarterback, a young Canadian quarterback that finally earns the starting position. And what happens the first week after he accomplishes that goal? He gets injured. I mean, I love this Edmonton team, and I wish them a lot more luck, and I wish their fan base a little more luck. And in this game, Winnipeg, David, Winnipeg has figured out. I remember how we used to win, and they're back to winning again, and they're full value for that winning. They're no gifts; they earn every victory.
Yeah, I think the big one here is for Winnipeg. Don't put it all on Zach Claros. They
Nope.
can't. They tried, unfortunately, and this is something they're gonna have to realize. If the other teams neutralize the running back game, if Brady Alvarez not doing so well, if they find a way to beat that defense and put it in Zach Claros' hands, I don't like Winnipeg's chances. And look, they've been so good, and it might be some people might say I'm crazy to say this. I don't like Winnipeg this year. Their defense is doing so good. I'm concerned it's going to fall off eventually for them. And then when you put it on, and then you ask the offense to put up, I don't know if they're going to be able to do it.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is what we've been talking about all along here, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've been talking about the defense carrying the day and the offense not doing their share. And if somebody figures out how to avoid the defense, then you have a problem. But Trey Ford threw 2 interceptions. A lot of interceptions in this game. And his rushing, Edmonton has a good rusher in Justin Rankin, 157 yards. We saw the last one, 200 yards, 157 here. You hardly ever see a rushing game that breaks 100 yards. You don't see a rusher break 100 yards. There were 2 of them that go over 150, 200 and plus. So, they've got the makings of a good team. Looking here at receiving, again, mediocre receiving numbers in this game for Edmonton.
Well, the quarterback play, right? They made the decision now that they're not going to go with Trey Ford because they believe that McLeod Bethel Thompson, speak words, David, gives them the better chance because he's not going to be making the mistakes. Problem is, Trey Ford, in my opinion, is still the better quarterback.
He's a game breaker.
He is a game breaker. McLeod Bethel Thompson, he makes mistakes too, but they get overlooked because he's the veteran, right? Maybe it's because they feel like he makes a mistake, he's going to learn from it. But I don't know. Like I look at this game. That game, Trey Ford was averaging better yards per attempt than McLeod. Yeah, the the problem too is they didn't have a lot going for them. Yeah, they had the running game going for them, but Winnipeg's like, we'll let you run for that many yards if you're only going to score 14 points.
Yeah.
So,
very
yeah, I think right now, if you are in Edmonton going into the rematch, lean on the running game, but you have to find ways to put up touchdowns, put up more than 14 points. Find a way to break that Winnipeg defense. It's not easy. I know that. It's easier said than done, but the one thing that Edmonton didn't have going with them too is they lost a time possession battle. And where's your special teams? Right? We talked about Javon Leake when he went there. He was going to be the game changer. I don't know if I've seen it yet. Have you seen it? I personally haven't seen it.
No, I think the Argos did fine in recovering the loss of Javon Leake.
Mhm.
Janarian Grant has been no less worthy than Leake was last year, and we're talking about a good season by a kick returner, right, a punt returner, whatever. We saw a good year of that with Leake, but we've seen Janarian Grant run a few back, and so the Argos have that kick returner that gives you the magic. And yeah, you're right. I think Edmonton expected a little more magic from Javon Leake, and they haven't received it. And again, it's the Canadian Football League. The kicking game, we talk about the kicking game in the Canadian Football League. We talk about field position and we talk about scoring and special teams, unlike the NFL, have a large impact on the way a game's played and how much the offense works. And kick returner can give a quarterback something that they need or will help them have a better possession, right? So, yeah, he hasn't been as great as they'd hope he'd be. Edmonton in itself hasn't been, a team that people have a lot of faith in. Um, and it's too bad the game they had against Winnipeg. I think they came up a little bit flat, personally.
You just can't do that against a team like Winnipeg.
No,
They
no,
smell
because they're gonna
blood. They hunt.
they expose your weaknesses,
Yeah.
take advantage of your weaknesses, make you pay for what you do wrong or what you don't do right. That's the thing about Winnipeg. You got to play good football to beat them. This is one of the things about Winnipeg. I think I want to say more than any other team. They're the kind of team that they're not going to let you play your best football, and if you can't overcome that type of defense, you're not going to win. Montreal, same kind of thing, but Montreal's more of the defenses. It's not a question. You know how good they are. We forget how good the Winnipeg defense is.
Yeah, it's the best. It's probably other than Montreal. I think that's the best defense in the league. It took them a little bit of time, but I think really think like is it the Toronto game or just before the Toronto game, they started to find their rhythm and they've been unstoppable ever since.
Absolutely.
Right?
They were
I mean, they've
embarrassed.
been winning each and every week. Is it sustainable? As I said, I'm still skeptical if it is, but for now, they're going to ride that wave. Michael Shea, coaches love when the defense is playing like this because it means there's not a lot of pressure on us on offense to do as much to win the game.
Yeah, and Winnipeg has been the most consistent team in the West. They were consistently bad to start the season, figured out how to play, and they played really well since.
I like that.
Really been a tale of two.
They've been very consistent. They were bad to start, consistently good now.
Exactly.
They're consistent at being consistent.
Absolutely. And if they maintain this consistency going out, they are going to win the division. There's no question about it because if they keep playing like this, this is Winnipeg has learned one thing that reminds me of last year with the Argos. Winnipeg is doing it this year. They're always doing enough to win, David. They're always doing just enough to win. They're not really clocking anybody, but they're doing enough to win.
And for them, that's good enough.
Absolutely. It's
right?
good enough for anybody.
Because if they get to the playoffs, especially if they win the West, that's their secret formula. We only need to win one game. The other team's got to win more than one.
Absolutely.
Right? Well, so I think we're almost so we are at the 1 minute countdown, Frank.
Well, we'll go out early. How's that? We'll go out.
Well, I'll say this: tonight's games, Edmonton, Winnipeg, and you got BC Hamilton. Those are the most important games on the calendar this weekend.
Well, I think the cat fight's going to be really interesting.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. Final thought before we go.
Go ahead.
Should Nathan Rourke be the quarterback going forward?
Well, he hasn't played like he should be.
Yeah,
that's the problem. He hasn't played like he should be. But you would think I would put him in there, help him get back his confidence, because I think what we're looking at is the hangover, the NFL hangover.
Yeah.
His confidence was really, I mean, just think about what he went through in the NFL, how many teams he went through. How, I mean, if I put myself inside his position and all I see is where's my chance to prove what I can do?
Hmm.
It never arrived. Too bad for that. Like the kid, still think he'll be a success in BC, and a lot of teams are hoping he's just not successful when they're up against him. That's the hope that other teams have, that he doesn't find his game while he's playing them.
Yep. That's true.
Thanks for this, David.
Thank you, Frank.
For David Morassutti, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Talk Aaron Live Mondays at 4 p.m. The show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network for CFL Talk news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer. Please check out SpanglishWorld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it here, read it, download it, live it. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you next time.